Hi, my name is Scott Van Wyk. I'd like to welcome you to our Burlingame differential division. We're going to take you to a quick walkthrough of our process, kind of show you how we do what we do here when we rebuild the Dana 404 model family product. Our first stage is going to be our teardown area. So at teardown, what we're going to do is we're going to completely disassemble the product. Every nut, bolt, and washer comes out. Every O-ring, bearing, seal is removed. Every weller reman gets all new bearing, seals, and washers and O-rings. They're not going to do a lot of inspecting at this point. Obviously, the parts are pretty greasy, grimy. They're hard to see if they're good or bad. If they're clearly bad, blown apart, they can throw them out. But if they're all in one piece, they're going to go ahead and get put on these tree racks right here. These tree racks are going to get organized in a way so that when we run them through a wash bay, everything gets cleaned well, so the inspector can inspect the parts and they're good and clean. We obviously care a lot about safety here, so there's a lot of different processes that we put in place at teardown to keep people safe. When they're doing bearing removal, moving heavy components, there's specialty bearing removers that we have in the shop to try to not only help people do things safely, but to do things efficiently. This is where our newer associates start, so there's a big focus on safety in this area. When they're trained up, we expect them to tear down about 12 to 14 units a day per person. We're usually going to have 2 people here from the beginning to the end of the shift each day. Once that teardown rack comes over, it's going to get placed in the smart washer. It's going to run about an 8-minute cycle in here, and the parts are going to get cleaned with a high pressure, high temperature degreaser. If you look at this rack here, you can see what a rack looks like once it comes out of the cleaner, so it is very clean. So all of the cast iron components that are on that rack will actually come this way, and they'll come over to our initial grind area. So this is where we're going to do all the initial prepping of our cast iron components. If they're clean off the rack, ready to go, then they can process them immediately. If there's still some buildup, then they can put them in this hot tank for a little while, usually about 15 to 20 minutes to finish breaking down the rest of the grime if the mart didn't take it out. Once he's done cleaning them and getting them ready, he's going to place them in the downdraft table to keep all the dust down in the shop. He's going to go ahead and prep the exterior of the carrier. He's going to remove all the rust, paint, debris, grease from the exterior. Also going to clean up the mating surfaces with a wire wheel. He's also going to go in and inspect the bores, make sure the bores match our specifications, and also that the threads are all in good condition. Once he's done with that, he's going to put them back on the cart. Here's a finished piece that you see here. Once there's enough pieces on that cart's going to get wheeled over here to our paint area. So we've got a downdraft here, just like we have at initial grind, to try to help keep the dust down in the shop. We're going to paint our case shafts in here. You see we paint them black, as well as our adjusting rings. We'll place those in there and paint those, and then we have a red gun set up to be able to paint all of our carriers with a red paint. Once they're done painting them, they're going to hang them on these tree racks to get a good dry. Once they're nice and dry, they're going to get brought over here to this table, and they're going to actually go through and condition all the mating surfaces, clean up any overspray. Then they're also going to do a second inspection on all the bores and threads. Our initial grind associate processes a lot of cast irons, so we have the necessity to have a second quality check here. This is the last place the cast is going to get looked at before it actually goes up to the builder. And then over here is our inspection area. So once all the parts are going to get taken off this rack, they're going to get put on this bench here where they're all going to get inspected, each part. Each unit that we have is a core tag. That core tag gives us a lot of information. It gives us the original source of the unit, whether it was a purchase or whether it was an invoice, customer return. And we also do a failure on every core. So that's helpful in the event that the customer should have an issue with the unit 8 months down the road. We can look back at the original core and know exactly what was wrong with that core. We also can have the full part detail of the parts that we replaced in that core. Once the inspector is done inspecting all of their parts, they're going to discard the components that don't meet our specifications. Once he does that, he's going to come in and he's going to punch in our core tag into our inspection profile system. This will walk him through ordering all the parts for that unit the correct way. So he's going to basically tell the system, this is what I got out of this core. The system already knows what unit you're trying to build, what model and ratio, so it knows what needs to be in there. So when they tell the computer this is what we actually salvaged out of the core, the computer will go ahead and tell them this is everything that you need to be able to finish that unit. Once that computer gives them that information, they'll select that options, and those will post all the parts directly out of that core. It'll print them out a pull sheet with all the part detail on it. That will then get put on a cart with all the parts that they deem to be good, and those will go back to our parts area to get parts pulled, and the cast iron will get put back on the cart at that same time. So this is our parts department. We have all of our A-moving components here. You see they're very organized, very clean. We have a separate bin for new, rebuilt, and used components. We have bearing kits and fasteners here, and then we have all of our gear sets on the rack behind us over here. So when the inspector is done with the unit, they're going to go ahead and wheel it back here, and this is the pull sheet that they print off at inspection. This tells the parts department everything that needs to be placed on this cart in order to rebuild this unit. And again, it also has the core tag number on it that we talked about earlier, and the full part detail. So parts department, we have 3 associates. When they see a cart over here, they'll come grab it and they'll pull each part as referenced on the sheet, whether it's new, rebuilt, or used, and what bin location it needs to come from, and they'll indicate each one of those is pulled with a mark, and they'll initial that when they're done. Once they pulled all the necessary components, this cart will then get wheeled over to the build area where our pre-assembled process will begin. So this is our build area here. So we have a different process this year that we've begun to use at Burlingame. We have a pre-assembled process. So this associate will take a cart from the queue just out of the parts department. He'll take it over to his bench. He'll start offloading the components. He'll start pressing all the bearings on. That's the main focal point of this position, is to get all the bearings on everything. So as he's pressing bearings on, he's going to inspect the parts, make sure they meet our expectations. And also he's going to do the pinion preload over here. So he's going to assemble the pinion and the bearings and the cage all together, get the preload just right. That's why you see all these spacers right here that we have. So he has all the spacers he could need to get that pinion preload set up just perfect. We have our bench press where we have our gauge marked at the correct tonnage for roll torque check. So that's the main goal of this position, is to get the pinion preload correct and then press all the bearings on. And from there we go to our next position. So this is our second pre-assembled position. At this station, what we're going to do is actually load the internals into the case halves, bolt the case halves together, and install the ring gear onto the case half. Once that process is done, everything's Loctited, torqued down, he'll place all the components on the cart with the rest of the pre-assembled parts, and then we'll go over to the build area where it'll actually get built. So for the build area, some things that we have that are unique is our diff rotators. So you see this stand that we have, this was all built in-house, designed in-house. It's a gear-reducted motor on it, so it's all motorized. Extremely safe way to do it. Takes a lot of the force out of physically manhandling the unit. So they're going to mount the carrier into that rotator, and then they're going to take all those sub-assemblies that were built at pre-assemble 1 and pre-assemble 2 and start assembling that unit. When they do the pinion preload, they're going to use a electric torque gun to actually hit pinion nut torque, which is extremely important. It's a high failure point if not done correctly, so we've invested heavily in tooling and spacers and processes to get a pinpoint roll torque each time. Some other things that they're going to check, they're going to actually use the rad gun or the electric torque gun to torque their cap bolts down. Again, a high failure point if not done correctly, so we invested in tooling to be able to do that very accurately. They're also going to check the input end play. That's another check that they're going to do manually with a dial indicator and a pry bar. Once that unit's done, they've done all those checks, all their information that they documented on the build for roll torque and nut torque and end play, all that's filled out in the paperwork. They're going to have a second inspector sign off on their end play to make sure that their end play is within spec. Once that's done, that unit will be removed from the rotator and it will get moved over to our bench inspection or line inspection area. So our line inspection is where a second associate or a leadership team member is going to go ahead and give that unit a thorough inspection. It's about a 35-point inspection. It's all done in Engage. There's a program built in Engage to be able to walk the associate through everything. So they're going to have the paperwork from the unit, from the builder, so they know what the unit is for model, ratio, backlash, end play, preload. They're going to verify all those things here, do a thorough inspection to make sure the power divider locks and unlocks properly. If it has a diff lock, that functions correctly with no air leaks. They're going to check ratio, spline counts on the side gears, internal operation. They're going to spin the unit over, make sure there's no binding, it's smooth. They're going to look to make sure all the bearings are seated and that there's no dirt, rust, or debris in the carrier, no damage to the mounting flange or missing sealant. They're also going to check the input threads, input splines, and make sure those things are all in good condition. Once he passes that, it's going to get placed in a basket. That basket will then go back to our dyno or our final quality area, where we'll do about an 80-point inspection back there before the unit leaves to go to the customer. Well, this is our final inspection area here at Burlingame. We're going to do about an 80-point inspection on every unit before it leaves this facility. He's got his Engage program. It has all that inspection built into it, so he punches the ID number into the computer and it walks him through everything that he needs to check. They're going to check everything on that unit from input to output, the bottom end. They're going to verify cap bolt torque, input end play, ratio, all the specs obviously, and make sure that everything functions as it's supposed to. Make sure the pattern's good, the seal surfaces are good, sealants in the appropriate locations. If there's anything amiss with that unit, they're going to fail that unit. When they fail that unit, it's going to record it as a failure, and it's going to go back up to the line to go ahead and fix whatever that failure was. Once that failure is fixed, they have to actually document what they did to rectify the problem, and that all gets stored on that unit. So if there's an issue later with that unit, we know the history of the unit when it was here. We know what it went through, if it failed an inspection, what it failed for, what was done to fix it. Once that unit's passed and he said it's good to go, it's going to be ready for transfer. The status becomes available. He can now sell it or transfer it. He's going to make the call on where to send that, which store has the biggest need for that particular model and ratio. Once he goes ahead and prints that transfer label off, then he's going to put the unit on our trolley system here. He's going to actually run that through our paint booth. Our units get a final paint job. We paint them on the line, but then we paint them again back here before we bag them up, just so that they look as good as they perform. Once that unit's done being painted, it's going to get hung here to dry. And then once it's dry, it's going to get a heat shrink bag applied to it. It's going to get all the appropriate labeling on it. And this unit's now ready to sell. This particular one is sold and heading to a customer. That's why it's banded to a skid. But if it's a stock unit, it'll get put in this basket with all these other stock units here, and they will get transferred out to the various locations so we can service our customer. That's Weller Burlingame. We appreciate you taking the time to walk through our process with us today. Hopefully you found it informative and you got something out of it. So thanks for stopping by. Enjoy the rest of your day.